welcome to this webinar. We're here today to celebrate and challenge actually Hispanic Serving Institutions, the students we serve, the faculty and staff that do such important work. The number of Hispanic students attending universities and colleges, certainly including APLU institutions, has substantially increased in recent years, but we need more. Hispanic serving institutions are critical to all this. We need higher graduation rates, as we do across the board in public universities. Progress, but much to be done. We've made some progress, we've not made as much progress actually on the diversity of our faculty across our institutions. Again, some progress in some institutions, but the numbers aren't what we'd like. I note that the important project of NSF, a very large project, working on faculty recruitment of faculty of color, funded by NSF and co-led by APLU and University of Wisconsin. I note this huge effort that is planned and getting underway of many institutions, certainly a large number, mostly Hispanic serving institutions that University of Illinois Chicago is working on to look at identifying and fostering undergraduate Hispanic students that are interested in academic careers. Lots of ideas, lots of work, but as I say, this is a day and opportunity to celebrate and challenge Hispanic serving institutions. We have a wonderful panel, and I know it will be a great discussion. Thank you all for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peter. Buenos días y buenas tardes a todos los que nos acompañan hoy. Good morning, good afternoon to all who join us today. My name is Mitsy Gonzalez, she, her, hers, and I serve as a program manager with APLU and the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities. Prior to advancing in today's program, I want to recognize and respect the Indigenous land where I find myself today. I'm currently on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Piscataway people, and I want to thank them for sharing this space with me today. APLU and the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities are excited to host this year's Hispanic Heritage Month webinar. This is the second. Last year we had an amazing turnout, an amazing conversation, and we're so excited for each of you to be joining us today. The impact and contributions of the Latino communities in our country should be celebrated daily, and it's something that we do daily. But today we're especially honored to spend time highlighting the critical role of Hispanic Serving Institutions, also known as HSIs, in educating and advancing Latino and all learners. HSIs are defined as institutions of higher education with 25% or more total undergraduate Hispanic full-time enrollment. HSIs enroll 67% of Latino undergraduates, but are only 18% of all institutions. The designation itself cannot automatically signal that these institutions are serving Latino learners with intentionality. The three institutions we have represented today have all obtained the Hispanic Serving Institution designation. We'll center today's conversation on how these leaders and these institutions are advancing their identity as an HSI through their practices and policies. As we move through today's discussion, please use the Q&A feature because we want this to be an engaging conversation and we want to hear from you. So feel free to submit your questions through that feature in your Zoom at the bottom of your screen. But we also have another feature, which is the chat feature. And again, this is an opportunity for you all to affirm anything you're hearing or to engage with the panelists and echo something they said or elaborate further. So feel free to use both of those features throughout today's presentation, and then towards the end, we'll open up for questions. With that said, I'll now briefly introduce the great set of panelists we have with us today. First off, on my screen, I see Felix Matos Rodriguez, the Chancellor for the University of New York, the nation's largest urban university. He is a scholar, teacher, administrator, and former cabinet secretary for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Thank you for joining us today, Chancellor Rodriguez. Next on my Gracias. Next on my screen, I see Provost Kimberly Andrews Espy, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Texas at San Antonio. She's an academic servant leader with more than 2 decades of higher education experience, and a deep commitment to advancing institutional, academic, and student success. At UTSAs, she's been expanding what it means to be an institution that intentionally serves Latino and all students. Thank you for joining us today, Provost Espy.
Thanks so much, Mitsy. It's a pleasure being here as an ally and advocate.
Wonderful. And last but not least, my fellow Floridian with a beautiful background, Dr. Jd Valdes, Assistant Vice President, Enrollment Management and Services at Florida International University. In this role, Dr. Valdes develops and champions strategies that positively influence transfer student enrollment and outcomes and improve the student experience end to end. In 2005, she founded Transfer and Transition Services, a unit that today serves the second largest transfer student enrollment in the nation, with nearly 10,000 new transfers annually. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Valdes.
Thank you so much, Mitsy. Bienvenidos a todos.
Bienvenidos. Pues vamos a empezar. Let's get started. To open up the dialogue, can each of you explain what it means to be a leader at a Hispanic Serving Institution? And Provost Espy, we'll go ahead and kick it off to you.
Sure. Let me give you a little bit of context about UTSA. San Antonio is the 7th largest city in the United States. It's majority minority, but one that has one of the highest poverty rates amongst the top 25 metros. Prior to 1969, San Antonio didn't have a 4-year university, and that's really not an unhappy accident. We were founded when our Mexican-American advocates, our political leaders, our business leaders got together because they recognized the importance of a 4-year institution and the power that it has relative to transforming economic and social prosperity and bringing that to our community. That's what UTSA is all about relative to driving student success. And that's why I'm here. When I think about our university, we were one of the original cohorts that was designated in 1994 as a Hispanic Serving Institution. And since that milestone, we've worked quite hard to ensure access, to ensure completion for Hispanic students, and by extension, all students. We're now trying to kick it up kind of a level further by doing what we call Hispanic Thriving. And what we're really aimed to accomplish is that we're one of the relatively few universities that are integrating our commitment to the success of our Hispanic students with the goals and impact of a great research and discovery enterprise. So to us, Hispanic Thriving means that we aim to advance our community by supporting our Hispanic students to achieve their career goals, by delivering an educated workforce for our community, by supplying the kind of applying our knowledge towards our grand challenges and commercializing technology, and really thinking hard about how do we prepare the next generation of Hispanic leaders then to spawn that next cycle of opportunity. We enroll roughly 35,000 students, about 60% are Hispanic, about half are Pell eligible, another half are first generation. So we are laser focused on that success, and it's a real pleasure to be here representing our institution.
Thank you, Provost Espy. We're happy to have you. And I'll turn it over to Chancellor Rodriguez.
Thank you. Again, just a little context too for those who might not be familiar with the City University of New York. We're 25 campuses. We have community colleges are part of the system, and we have 4-year institutions and professional schools too. So we have an integrated, someone can go from a GED to a degree in medicine, law, or a PhD within our system. The Latino students comprise about 31% of our students. It's the largest of our groups in our very diverse student body, which is reflective of the city of New York. We have in the state of New York 34 HSIs, and I'm very proud that 16 of those are within our CUNY system, and we have 3 emerging SSI schools. I was president before being chancellor of 2 of those HSIs, Queens College, a 4-year school at Ostos Community College, which is a 2-year school. And I highlight Ostos, which has about 60% of the students as being Latinos, because it is a school that has a history that comes from the struggle and the fight for the Latino community to achieve higher access in higher education. So I am very proud that at CUNY, we have taken that mission very seriously. At times, it comes from our own reflection of what we need to do. And at times, the community has sort of forced us to think harder about some of those issues. And that's the reality, I think, of public higher education. And again, I think that the HSI designation is one that is both an opportunity and a promise and a commitment. An opportunity to do more, to look under the hood at the programs that may or may not be working, to be intentional about supporting Latino students for success. You can also do that and benefit a whole range of other students too. And I'll quote a couple of examples later in the program. But then there's also a commitment to really have that intentionality and that direction, and to partner with many others in the community that are also finding ways to support the Latino community. In my role as chancellor, part of my mantra is that public universities need to look like the students and the communities they serve. So I'm also very proud that in my role as chancellor, first Dominican American woman, president of one of our community colleges, Daisy Coco de Filippi, who was appointed last year, the dean of our honors college, Dean Valdes, also a Latina, the dean of our School of Professional Studies, Jorge Silva Puras, and the president of one of our HSIs in the Bronx, Lehman College, also Dr. Delgado. So very proud of a very diverse team here at CUNY.
Thank you, Chancellor Rodriguez. And we'll touch more on that, but the things you said about opportunity and commitment as HSIs really stood out to me. But I don't want to steal the floor away from Dr. Valdes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. No, it's great to hear from my fellow panelists. So again, starting with a little bit of context, FIU is among the top 10 largest public research universities in the nation. We're a Research One institution located in beautiful Miami, Florida, a multilingual and multinational city. We're Hispanic serving, with about 65% of our student enrollment identifying as Latinx. Approximately 50% of our students are first generation. You mentioned, of course, earlier, Mitsy, that we serve the second largest transfer student enrollment in the nation. So we have an amazing pathway from our state college system to FIU. And we're a top performer of social mobility. And I think that's where I sort of want to segue a little bit around the fact that 9 out of the 10 top ranked social mobility performers on those indices are HSIs, and one of them being FIU. So we have a longstanding commitment to our Hispanic students, and really, of course, all our students, and really rank first and second in many of our programs in graduating those students. I think the other interesting piece around that is that we're seeing more and more discipline associations, foundations, donors, entities like NSF looking to us as the standard bearers to diversify disciplines and industries. And so I think that's a testament to the good work that we're doing. And as the chancellor noted, it's also about going in and looking under the hood and interrogating our own practices and making sure that where the gaps are, we ask ourselves, you know, what it is that we need to do next.
I love what you all are saying, because when I think of the identity as HSI, everything that a common thread throughout is there's action oriented to it. You don't just get the designation and that's it. It's a call to action beyond just that. And so I think that segues very well into our next question. How does your institution's identity as an HSI impact how you think about policies, design, program design, recruitment, and partnerships? And whoever wants to go first, feel free to come off mute.
I don't mind giving this a start. So I think identity is very much rooted in the foundation of the institution. You know, any organization. FIU opened its doors in 1972 to only transfer students and adult learners as a junior serving institution. And we did so in complete response to the community need for students at the time who were place bound and had degrees, but didn't have a public institution close to them. And I think that thread in how we work with students, and in particular Latinx students, has really followed us through the history, right? So I think ultimately when we think about practices, I think the first question is, are opportunities and services accessible to all students, right? I mean, it's a pretty simple question, but for example, if you have internships and they're unpaid, ask yourself who can participate in that, right? And expand that to study abroad and all sorts of high impact practices. So you have to really be mindful and intentional, as you mentioned earlier, Mitsy, about how you respond to these questions, right? If our STEM students are only hearing about undergraduate research and the importance of that in honors courses, then when does the transfer student hear that, where they have a lot less time at the four-year research university to basically engage in that transformational experience? And then from a recruitment perspective, I think ultimately as a Research One institution, we fully understand that access to the institution has multiple pathways or multiple entry points. And we look at those entry points from an outcomes perspective and from a learner-centered framework. Our admissions team is very intentional about recruitment efforts and partnering with high schools in low income and high unemployment communities. And sometimes that has a direct entry to FIU for freshman students. And then some other times it's just that promise of the baccalaureate degree is going to be better suited through the route of our state college system.
So I'd like to add a little bit to what Janie said that I thought was really well captured. Again, talking intentionally about that word, intentionality. But one of the things I think that's really particularly important that we do, that HSIs do so well, is really focusing on and leveraging the students' assets that they bring to the table when they come to the university, right? There's some very specific, whether it's the navigational or aspirational capital, that ability to code switch in different environments, that is a real strength, right? So how do we leverage and take advantage of those assets that really can help guide a student through? We think about our student support services and how do we foster that sense of belonging, leveraging those assets. We have a program, First to Go and Graduate, that is really focused on building pods of familias that link our first generation faculty with our first generation students, that forms that bond that is about that connection. And it's those sorts of thinking about what do people bring to the table and how do we really expand upon that can help carry our students through and leverage that resilience that's so important relative to all that our students are balancing and juggling to be able to complete college.
And Chancellor Rodriguez, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that. Oh, he might be frozen. Okay, well, something that I just really want to, I appreciate that you touched on, both Janie and Provost Espy. One is the social mobility piece. I think that's something that can't be missed, and in the importance and the role that HSIs have in educating and the not only impacting the economy, but the workforce. So thank you for touching on that. And we'll touch more on that in a moment, but also leveraging your assets and knowing who are your students and who are you as an institution. And as that continues to evolve and change. So with that, I want to transition more on the people leveraging your assets, and one of those assets being your faculty members. So if you all could speak a little bit more to the critical role that faculty play in supporting Latino student success and excellence.
Sure, so maybe that's a good place for me to start as the Chief Academic Officer here at UTSA. And obviously faculty are at the core of our vision to be a preeminent HSI that we hope other universities will look to as a national model around student success, community engagement, and discovery and innovation. Faculty really are central to the academic experience of our students, to their progress and their success, both in and out of the classroom. They serve pivotal roles relative to mentors and models of success so that our students can see that visible pathway and pathways to what they can become. Further, we all know that empirical research has demonstrated over and over again that innovation, critical thinking, and problem solving are greatly enhanced with a diverse, inclusive academic community that supports the participation and success of all members. So the more that we're intentional about including those who have been historically marginalized and not included, the more pathways are opened up, the greater diversity in thinking and innovation results. You know, we're very fortunate that our faculty typically come to UTSA because they want to be at an HSI, because they want to make a difference in the lives of our students. But we have some work to do. You know, last time in our last faculty census, roughly 20% of our faculty identify as Hispanic or Latino. While that is better than some of our peers, in no way does that comport with our goals. We do hope that our faculty will fully reflect the proportion of our students who are here in our community and here at UTSA. So we have work to do to continue to increase our recruitment of our faculty. Our goal is to increase the number of underrepresented faculty by 50% in the next 5 years. It is a very ambitious goal. And as a part of that, what we've had to do is we have overhauled our programs and our practices to really increase our representation of our faculty. We are investing central funds to ensure that we're recruiting and hiring outstanding folks. We have programs where we're growing our own, we're bringing in postdocs, and then have a specific pathway to become a faculty member. We've changed the way that we're advertising and searching, and we've begun to make some headway. In this year's cohort, for example, 33% of our faculty identify as Hispanic. That's up 11 points from the year before and up 4 points from the year prior to that. And so, you know, we're starting to make a difference. Last year, we hired 2 deans, both of whom identify as Latino. One's actually native of San Antonio, which was a huge benefit. It's wonderful to have those stories, but it does require intentionality at every step. And it's the environment that oftentimes is what is the kind of keeper of retaining them here at UTSA.
I want to quickly acknowledge, welcome back, Chenzo Rodriguez. I know there might have been a few technical difficulties, but we're happy you're back. We're just talking about the critical role that faculty play in advancing Latino student success and excellence. Provost Espy mentioned leveraging our assets, and faculty are certainly one of those assets. So feel free to, if you'd like to respond to that.
Well, my apologies for the disappearance, but you know, such is, you know, life in the times of COVID. But I mean, that is one of the things I was mentioning, that as chancellor, part of my role is to make sure that the entire system is moving in that direction, right? And that includes a diverse set of administrators, a diverse set of faculty. Like Dr. Espy said, we probably have some of the best numbers across the nation in terms of diversity of our faculty. But they're not where we should be given the population that we serve, and we need to do even more. And we know how important faculty and some of the programs like programs in Latino and ethnic studies can be to student retention. And I ended up, I mean, I'm a historian who taught history of the Caribbean and Latin America, and in my first teaching job, precisely because the Latino students were asking for a Latino history class, I ended up teaching a class that was not really part of my expertise, and I actually, you know, I started doing research in that area as a result of that connection with the students. So those are obviously very, very important in any field. Part of my role is to keep pushing the system to do those things, to look hard at the data. I'll give one example in my, when I was the president at Queens College, that actually has a very funny story, because I became president and we had hit the numbers for HSI, but to the question of intentionality, I guess nobody was paying attention to that. And I came and, you know, we did all the appropriate paperwork with our folks in the Department of Ed. And people thought that, oh my God, we got a Latino president, right? We hit the HSI standard, but the numbers were already there. We were just not looking with the intentionality. So the year after, we got a STEM HSI grant based on what we have learned was not working for our Latino students in STEM. And that grant allows us to go back to our main partner, Queensborough Community College, our main feeder within the CUNY system. And both faculties at Queens and at Queensborough work together to redo all the entry-level courses in most of the bench sciences, so that it will be easier for students to be able to transfer based on a curriculum that was done jointly by faculty. We did that because we're looking at how to improve the success of the Latino students. But that new curriculum benefited all students at both Queensboro and at Queens, right? So this also shows that sometimes the added resources, the added investment that universities might bring to looking at dealing with addressing the Latino population can bring gains not just to those Latino students, but to the entire university. I think it's something that is important to keep in mind as we think about
Thank you, Chancellor Rodriguez. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jenny.
Thank you so much. I hate to see him, come and go. He's got so much wealth of knowledge and experience, but really, as the provost mentioned, faculty are absolutely essential. At FIU, about 90% of our students are commuters. And so faculty are really the connection, right? It's the most frequent point of contact for students and for the university. I think shifting a little bit, since I didn't hear it from the others, that might help to offer a different lens in terms of what happens in the classroom. Our Center for the Advancement of Teaching supports faculty in evidence-based efforts around that learner-centered course environment and inclusive teaching that I think so many of our institutions have engaged in. That has led to a lot of, I would say, with the addition of student surveys and the learning assistant program that we have, the largest in the nation, where it's a really wonderful co-creation of what the modern university active learning classroom can look like. And that work started with gateway courses several years ago. And based on those courses, those foundational courses that allow students to progress and succeed along the way and certainly complete, really has resulted in 21,000 additional students passing those courses in the last 5 years. And it's one of the most amazing points of pride that we have at the institution. And our Center for the Advancement of Teaching was just recognized as a finalist of an example of excelencia, which we're so happy about, that great work. The work is now being expanded to courses in disciplines. So maybe not those foundational courses, but more advanced courses. And that makes me extremely happy because those tend to hit more of our transfer students, where we might have some of that misalignment in some of the work, and where we have to continue to do better work in bringing faculty together to align curricula for students. So I'm very excited about what's happening in the classroom at FIU and so many other institutions and HSIs.
Mitsy, one thing that's kind of interesting, I think, with the pandemic and all of our faculty having to pivot and then pivot again and pivot a third time, right, is that opportunity and openness to assistance from, for example, instructional designers and teaching and learning specialists. So we've really tried to embrace this as an opportunity, as kind of a wedge in. We found that some faculty who historically wouldn't necessarily have been as receptive or interested or really taking advantage of these support opportunities, that then has allowed us to broaden the curriculum, to use the inclusive pedagogy approaches that Janie was talking about, because it can make a huge difference. And I hope one of the things coming out of the pandemic is a continuation of that openness. We, for example, are continuing that model of support. We have both the points of contact in our colleges, as well as faculty champions in each of our departments, whose job it is, coupled with an instructional designer from teaching and learning services, to be working with faculty individually. So it'll be interesting to see, but we're really trying to continue to push that innovation and approach.
I love that you're able to take a positive spin on such a challenging year that's been, but I think that as you mentioned, higher education especially needs to seize this as an opportunity. So it's great to hear about how each of your institutions are doing just that. Dr. Valdes, I wanted to turn it back to you, but open it up for others to respond after. You mentioned opportunities for alignment. And I think as we think about transfer students and creating pathways, that alignment piece is so critical. So could you all, but Janie, kick us off, speak to the importance of partnerships between 2-year and 4-year institutions, especially as it relates to Latino student success? And what is your institution doing to advance Latino transfer student success?
It's a great question, and don't get me started. I could take over this whole session with transfer students and what we're doing and what I'm seeing nationally. So, ultimately, I'll start with, again, the framework in supporting, thousands and thousands of transfer students from our state system. We don't do that without having a really strong articulation model, which Florida, of course, has, and above average transfer outcomes for the state based on that model, which is longstanding and very effective. The thing about articulation is that helps student transferability and credit mobility, but it does little and it falls short of helping students become transfer ready and major ready. And that's where you have to take your articulation to a local level and to your partner level. And that means creating obviously, we have longstanding partnerships with our largest sending institutional partners in Miami-Dade College, Broward College, and Palm Beach State. So the region and, of course, locally. And so it takes everything from annual meetings amongst faculty and staff and senior administration and having conversations discipline to discipline in terms of trying to align curricula. And that's an area where I would say that we have to do better. As curriculum changes and disciplines change in response to the modern, sort of workforce needs. So that has to be ongoing. But what I'll also say is that the work that we've been doing around Connect for Success and that transfer pathway really is focused on that transfer affirming piece that the provost talked about a little bit earlier, and acknowledgement of those assets is absolutely huge. Right. And so we have that pathway that guarantees admission to FIU in particular. We incentivize it by telling students that they have to earn the AA degree within 3 years. And we're trying there to incentivize full-time enrollment, because our own data show that when students go part-time, it tends to put them away a little bit from the academic identity. Right. And so it's easier to get more hours at work. It's easier to, help with other issues in the family. And so we're trying to keep them fully enrolled. And then we have a set of bridge advisors who are housed at those partner colleges to support those students, offer opportunities for engagement, and really ready them, bring in that transfer and major readiness by having conversations around major selection very early while they're at the state college. And this work, by the way, is done completely in tandem with the college advisors and making sure they have the prerequisites and GPAs, because those things are really critically important for students to be, to have that readiness intact. Connect for Success reaches thousands of historically underrepresented students. About 70% are Hispanic. And so it really has the greatest potential to improve equity outcomes. Whatever you're doing at your institution, pay attention to your transfer pathways and strengthen those, and they will be absolutely invaluable to the success of your students.
Thank you, Dr. Valdes. I can feel your passion, and I just thank you for all the work that you are doing at FIU. Chancellor Rodriguez, I saw you went off mute, so would love to hear from you.
Yes, thank you. So a number of things. I mean, this is such critical work. We did system-wide, this is before I was chancellor, this was done 5-6 years ago, what we call sort of the Pathways Initiative, because we did some reflection and we saw that there were a lot of impediments in our 4-year schools from the students coming from our 2-year, from the community colleges, even if we were within the system. Some of that is history. We were not articulated in the same way even 20, 25 years ago. And as we know, our institutions sometimes, that history runs deep, and making culture change is not easy. So that pathway basically meant that all the gen ed courses that students took at community colleges immediately transferred, no questions asked, to the 4-year schools. And that might seem a no-brainer these days, in which people are focusing a lot more on transfers, but it was not the case for us at CUNY before. And it has been an incredible game changer in advancing the mobility of the students from the 2-year schools to the 4-year schools. I'm a big advocate. When I was president of a community college of Hostos in the South Bronx, we had a number of 2+2s. They have different names in other places, but it meant that the students were accepted at Hostos, but they already also accepted at one of the four-year schools. In this case, we had a number of programs with City College, which is the school in the system that has the only engineering school. So the students begin an engineering at Hostos, but they already knew that they were accepted into City. And they, in their second year, took a course or two already in City to get them in the mindset that they were going to be going to that school. It had the two faculties working together, which we know that at times is not always an easy thing to do in creating that curriculum that was seamless. And the data was very strong. Actually, some of our students were stronger than their native freshmen compare at the end. So I'm a big fan of the 2+2 because the 2+2 sends the message immediately to the student at the community college that the four-year degree is the goal, not two, right? That your path keeps going. And I think that can be a very powerful message to first-generation college students and in doing that work. So we just finished a transfer dashboard for all my presidents. We had a presentation. I meet with all the presidents in the system once a month. 2 months ago, we showcased the dashboard, and it gives all the presidents perfect data about the transferability of their connection with all the schools in the system by courses, by major, by discipline. A real great tool for them to see where some of the areas in their campuses where there's work to be done. And actually, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, now that we're giving the tool, in a couple of meetings down, I want them to report, having used the tool, what things have you identified that require more work on your campus that maybe you were not aware because you didn't have the full data. So this, you have to keep your foot on the pedal to bring about change here. And but we're very focused on that work.
So one of the things we haven't talked about is the role of community perhaps as much. And, for UTSA, about 40% of our students are transfer students, primarily from our Alamo Colleges district. So we're very fortunate to have a very strong relationship and work hard on that articulation. But at the same time, the community can play an important role, right? I mean, we know that finances are one of the single largest barrier, and not just for transfer, but for college going. And so we've been working with a nonprofit, the UP Partnership, and connecting to our Alamo Promise, which is a promise program relative to high school to Alamo, and then connecting our Bold Promise to Alamo so that it's a seamless pathway from the 25 high schools that have the lowest completion and the highest poverty to Alamo, then to us, so that students really can successfully finance their way to completion.
You segued perfectly into the next question about community, because I think that is an important role in terms of the community we have within our institution, the community that we have with our two-year institutions, but each of you are also located in urban settings. And so you're an urban serving university. And so I'm curious to learn about a little bit more, what do you all see the role of your institution playing in serving Latinos in your city and your state?
Let me take a first stab there. First, one of the things that I stress to all my presidents is that we are anchor institutions in all of the neighborhoods that we are, and our 25 campuses cover all the 5 boroughs in New York City. So we have a really formidable footprint, and we take that role very seriously. That means different things in different settings, right? The College of Staten Island navigates its relationship with that community in a different way that Hostos does, for example, in the South Bronx, than some of the schools that are located in Manhattan, right? So, but it's one of the DNA of the City University of New York. When I go to the legislature to ask for capital dollars, I remind them that whatever money we get is not just a building that's going to be used in an incredible way to teach students. It's going to be a building that's going to be used to teach high school students, to have civic engagement meetings, to have community meetings, to have town halls, to have early voting, right? Because that is part of the fabric of our community. In the case of the Latino community, I'm very, very proud, and actually it's part of my history, is that we have all universities tend to have academic research centers, right? That's some of the things that we do. But at CUNY, we have the only institutes, one dedicated to the entire Puerto Rican migration experience, the Center for Puerto Rican Studies. I actually was recruited to CUNY to serve as the director of that center. So when we talk about why faculty come to institutions, it's because you come to places that you know they value who you are and what's important to you. And that's part of my personal history here at CUNY. We also have the Center for Dominican Studies, the only university that has that. And those have been very, very community connected institutes, right? I know, for example, that at FOU, the Cuban, led by my good friend Jorge Duani, does a similar role, right? They're research focused, right? But they are an agent to be connected to the community, to do policy work, to engage even in advocacy, which can get complicated from time to time. But those are important things that we do. Another angle that I share here in New York, prior to the pandemic seems to have exacerbated that, is the number of Latino disconnected youth. Students were dropping out from high school, not coming to college, and not connected to the world of work, right? And we know that's a recipe for tragedy. So we're trying to work very hard with community organizations, with elected officials to see what kind of programming we can do to bring as many of those students as we can to CUNY, but if not, to be working with the other partners so that those students can find their right path to channel their assets, their energy, their brilliance, and contribute to the economy in New York, particularly now when we're in recovery mode.
Now, I'll add a little bit about some of the things we're doing in San Antonio, and it's about building an infrastructure for partnerships. So our College of Engineering and Integrated Design, along with our College for Health, Community, and Policy, through the work of the Sustainable Pervasive Urban Resilience Research Center, that's a mouthful, has joined with our city to set up a web platform that both shares our expertise at the university and the different things that our faculty bring to bear, as well as a place where our city agencies can share some of their challenges. So it's a great infrastructure that supports a wide range of both matching talent with opportunity. It's shown to be really helpful for us. For example, our San Antonio Metro Health District, working together with our faculty, just received a very large award to help relative to health disparities and COVID, using some really innovative approaches, taking advantage of, for example, our faith-based organizations as methods of outreach. So sometimes by thinking about that infrastructure and building a sustainable way to partner, it can spawn a number of opportunities where people can connect and roll up their sleeves together towards our mutual challenges.
So Mitsy, I'll add too, I mean, a lot of obviously what the provost and the chancellor shared, we do at FIU. The chancellor talked about our Cuban Research Institute. And of course, there are other programs and colleges and schools that, you know, have that ecosystem of working in their own unique spaces around serving our entire community. We can think very logistically about offices like career and talent development, right? That are really having those conversations with employers about what they're seeing on the ground, what they're working with, what they need, what skills they need. And so I'm going to flip the question just a little bit and say, what are we doing to shape the future of the economy and the workforce by shaping our students, right? And making them basically much more ready, responsive, and have a lot of agility to the changing workforce and what that looks like. So our quality enhancement plan has instituted 3 essential micro-credentials based on, again, workforce feedback and employer feedback around artificial intelligence, emotional intelligence, and data. And so that's really, I think, one of the pillars of what we're doing in the next 3 years to ensure that students are going in with the 21st century skills to their employers. And then the other piece that I'm incredibly passionate about is that we are reimagining how we work with adult learners, right? And what that means is right now we have about 36 million individuals who have some credit and no degree. And so what does that look like at a Research One university? It means that we are building prior learning assessment pathways. We're looking at the top 10 majors that are enrolling adult learners. And we're saying we have a lane for you. We have support for you. We understand and honor that the learning that you bring in may not necessarily have occurred in traditional learning frameworks. And so we're going to honor that. And then by virtue of honoring that learning, we are basically accelerating degree completion. And so that's really critically important to, I think, the work that we do to make sure that we are competitive nationally and globally, certainly from a state level, but globally, is to bring these individuals back to school and have them complete. And a portion of those students, at least some of the data that I saw, I think from 2018, was about maybe 5 million Latino students in that circumstance.
I just want to say thank you to all of you for also including the stories behind the numbers, but the numbers are in themselves are powerful. But I love that you all are also including the stories and the experiences behind that. We are at 2:46, and so I want to thank you all so much for the engaging conversation so far. But we've had a lot of people write in questions, and I wanted to start by leaning on our audience members to see what questions they have for you all. So many of the audience members today work in institutions that maybe haven't received the federal designation as an HSI, but they're seeing the changing demographics in their region, and they want to know how do they embrace being an HSI and authentically serve their Hispanic students? And from your perspective, what are the 3 most important things they should do, especially as institutions are striving to cultivate a racially inclusive and just environment for Latino students, faculty, and staff? So whoever wants to take that first.
Well, let me begin by saying that this has to be organic. And I think some of the things that you heard both from Dr. Valdes and Dr. Espy about the things they've done in Miami and San Antonio have a nature of organic development. Not that there was not some intentionality, not that there was not some intervention there, right? But this was not created or pushed for I mean, if you are an institution that is, nearby a large Hispanic population, right? And the students are now there. That's the first question, right? Because they should be coming into your school either through the natural pipeline of the K-12, or again, to Dr. Valdes' point, as many of those students are out there who are adult learners that might need additional schooling to complete or to be retooled, right? So if there's a mismatch there, that's the first thing to look at, right? Why is that pipeline broken? What are the structures that we have in place that have not led for what that would have been done? Nothing is natural or real, right? But that natural demographics to come to your campus. If you lead with that kind of question, if you lead with that kind of mindset, you will create the kind of organic through partnerships with community groups and others that will help you to build the programs. It would help you also to attract faculty that will be interested in participating in this project, and also administrators and staff members too, because they play a key role in student success and student support. So I think the first step is to make that that kind of analysis and move forward. Because I've seen, and I just mentioned sometimes I've seen some places want to get the designation to be able to apply for funding. And that tends to be where things go south, right? Where people are not doing it for the right reasons. So I think that my invitation would be to be very organic in the thinking about what needs to be done.
I have a couple things to add. I guess I would say, first of all, for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with the Excelencia in Education framework around intentionality, around putting data into practice, check it out, because I think it is very nicely articulated. It's a great roadmap of truly serving, and around that authenticity that the chancellor was speaking, that I think is really important. We spent a lot of time talking about numbers and statistics and background and things. And I would really encourage folks too to think about the qualitative elements, because they're equally important. You know, this month is Hispanic Heritage Month. It is a big deal at UTSA. We've been really intentional about telling some of our stories of our Tejano culture and achievements in our community. For example, we have a wonderful Mexican American Civil Rights GIS tour that our faculty developed. You know, where our Latinx students and faculty are in op-eds. We're celebrating their achievements in our courses. At our football game, we have mariachi, and at our graduation as well. And sometimes it's those pieces of belongingness that are really critical. And then lastly, I'd say it takes all of us. You know, it takes all of us around the campus to champion your personal story, to be an ally, to be an advocate, and to really do what's right, to focus on student success and think about those barriers. And it's not so much about the designation. It is about fully embracing our students' personal story and making sure they're successful.
I would echo that and really say that you have to rely on your data. If you want to fully understand your students, you have to talk to your students. Qualitative data, the student voice, what is their lived experience like in the classroom, in the institution itself, in what they have access to and what they feel they can participate in and not participate in. You have to hear those stories. Number two is find your champions. They are in your institution. They've been doing the work for a long time and they are there. So find them, use them. This is the time when we need those voices the most. And the other thing too that I learned a while back when I was working on Connect for Success and building that with the team is that I used to go out and I heard at that time, I used to, get in a car and go to another institution or fly somewhere and see what they were doing that was just, out of this world in the transfer space. And I would often be overwhelmed. And so you have to remind yourself that best practices are great, but you have to distill them to your context and to your students. And that is absolutely okay. And B, the work takes time. We've been working with transfer students for years and years. It takes the commitment, the practice, that self-interrogating practice to go back and do it better. And it takes a lot of passionate professionals and an ethos in the institution, as the provost mentioned, that this is everyone's work and responsibility.
So well said. And I'm sure people across the country that are listening and are snapping or clapping or saying yes. So thank you all so much for that. And I want to there's one more question from our audience that I want to close out with and hear from each of you. And then also if you have any closing remarks after that. But most federal dollars are devoted to undergraduate and graduate research are for US citizens. How do universities fund Latinx dreamers who want to enroll in research programs but cannot due to their documentation status? For example, McNair Scholars programs, STEM-related lab programs, etc.
Well, I mean, I'll say two things, right? One is and I think everybody in this panel probably, we are advocates to eliminate the barriers in those programs and others that create those conditions, right? That's the first line of not accepting whatever logic there is for that exclusion, right? And I know some of those things have to do with, federal legislation, but we cannot be silent, and we need to be highlighting those examples as we go. Different states have different takes to participation, right? I'm fortunate to be in the state of New York, where, for many of these things, we've been fairly inclusive, although it's been fairly recent. You will think that when New York's trajectory would have happened earlier, right? But and then we try to supplement the areas where the students can now participate with private philanthropy. We do it with, different things with student clubs. When the pandemic hit, you remember that New York got hit first. In the first stimulus dollar, the undocumented students didn't get any CARES money, and they didn't get any unemployment benefits. Right? So we raised about $10 million, the Chancellor's Emergency Fund, and most of the money there went to those schools because we knew that they have been excluded and they were hurting, right? Which is not exactly the question that was asked, but we try to be very intentional about that level of inclusion. But it also takes other advocacy to highlight every day how really discriminatory and really short-sighted to the country's future policies of exclusion like that are.
I don't think either of us could have said it any better than the Chancellor.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to say something that I heard. I've been taking notes, as I'm sure many people that are listening in are as well, in terms of things that you all said that really resonated with me. But then I would love to turn it over to you all with any closing remarks. But I think Provost Espy, you said it really well. It takes all of us. And I think it takes all of us on our institutional campuses, but it takes all of us to care as a collective of individuals who work in higher education across the field, and that we're not in it alone. You have people on your campus that are champions leading this work. And you also have a network of people across the country that want to be resources to you. So I hope that individuals continue to lean on the network of HSIs that are leading this work, institutions that are on this call, but also organizations that you mentioned, Provost Espy, like Excelencia in Education, HACU, that really are there as allies in the work and want to partner with institutions. So those are just things I heard. And Chancellor Rodriguez, you mentioned a lot of car analogies: interrogate, look under the hood, foot on pedal in regards to change. So again, this is something that we must continue the momentum, and beyond Hispanic Heritage Month, how is your institution being intentional? So again, thank you all so much for your remarks and your contributions and the work that you do on a daily basis. I want to see if you all have any closing remarks for our audience as we close out this year's Hispanic Heritage Month webinar. So Provost Espy, Chancellor Rodriguez, Jd Valdes, anyone feel free to chime in.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Mitsy, for hosting us. I think this has been a great conversation. And I just wanted to echo that the future of our country, the future of our states, and the future of our communities require and depend upon our intentionality and all of us linking arms to the success of our Latino students. And it's a real pleasure to be leading an institution in that effort and working with my colleagues around the table today.
Thank you so much, Mitsy, as well, IPLU. I think everything that's been said is wonderful. I'll share with you that this work is deeply meaningful and personal to me. I'm the daughter of Cuban exiles who left their country to make a better life for our family. Certainly the freedoms and the opportunities that we have afforded in this country. We meet students and families today, every day, especially in our transfer pathway, that have done the same. And whether it's political or economic, they are here looking for something better. And there is no better way to honor our families and their families to entrust post-secondary opportunity, career success, and changing their lives and the lives of their families forever. There's no more meaningful work.
Inspiring, thank you. And I will, in that same line, I will say that to remember, right, the history of all the wonderful things that Mitsy read in that bio occurred because a public institution back in Puerto Rico opened the doors to my mom and dad to be an engineer, and she was going to be a teacher until I was born. So that's why the public higher education space is so crucial. For that social mobility, for that real achievement of the American dream. That's why I came to CUNY about 20 years ago. And because it was a place also that was trying very hard to connect with the Latino community, right? So again, I always tell people that folks go where they know they're wanted. And if we create spaces that signal that to our faculty, to our students, to our communities, results will follow.
So well said. I just want to end with a quote that my mom would always tell me growing up: El futuro depende de ti. The future depends on you. And I think we can all agree on this call today that it does depend on us, and our students want to go to our institutions and want to thrive. And I look forward to seeing all the great work that's going to come out from all of our institutions. Thank you again for our amazing panelists. Thank you again for everyone that participated today and shared their time. APLU is hosting our virtual annual meeting on November 15th through the 17th. We'll put the registration in the link. We hope to see you all there, and enjoy the rest of Hispanic Heritage Month. Pa'lante y que pasen buen día. Have a great day, everyone.